God's up to something. And it's bigger than making a difference in the world. It's really, I think, more about making a different world. And Jesus didn't die to make a difference in the world. He died to make a different world. And I think in some ways that God has raised up E. Stanley Jones for this time, even more than the time that he lived, to show us how to make a different world and to raise up missionaries for that world.
The words of E. Stanley Jones, missionary, minister, philosopher, adventurer, and devoted disciple of Jesus Christ. Today, as a new generation is discovering his compelling, Christ-centered teachings, millions of people whose lives he touched remember E. Stanley Jones as the tipping point for their conversion experience. In fact, Jones was once described as the greatest missionary since St. Paul. As a young man in 1907, Jones traveled to India to begin his Christian mission work and the journey of a lifetime. In the ensuing years, E. Stanley Jones delivered tens of thousands of sermons and lectures, often speaking 2 to 6 times a day to spellbound crowds, and wrote 28 books, translated into 30 languages. He passionately proclaimed the gospel of Christ and applied it to personal, national, and international problems. Jones saw the need for mutual respect and dialogue, and he held roundtable conferences at which Christian and non-Christian sat down as equals to share their testimonies. 30 years before the United Nations came into being, he proposed a roundtable of nations. Today, nearly 40 years after his death, the words he spoke seem more relevant than ever. Clearly, this man who was a confidant of Franklin Roosevelt, a friend of Mahatma Gandhi, a role model for Billy Graham, and an inspiration to both Martin Luther King Jr. and Norman Vincent Peale, had something very special and lasting: unbridled joy in growing the kingdom of God on earth. Dr. Jones also believed in the value of personal accountability and fellowship. This, in fact, led him to found the United Christian Ashram movement. The word ashram is from the Sanskrit and literally means apart from work. He used the setting, indigenous to life in India, to teach others about Jesus Christ. Stranded back in the United States during World War II, he transplanted his Christian retreats in the U.S. and Canada and developed a strong spiritual growth ministry. So, after all the great work and impact that E. Stanley Jones had on the world, why is so little known about him today? What does the future hold for his legacy of faith and dramatic testament to the power of Jesus Christ?
But I think what God's doing now is showing us that our baptism is not just our ordination into ministry, but it's also our commissioning as a missionary. That everybody has a ministry to the body, but a mission in the world. And this understanding of what does it mean that God made me for a mission, and that mission is out there in the world, not just to make a difference, but to make a different world. And I think that's where E. Stanley Jones and his theology and his just the whole way he lived as well has some incredible things to say to us.